I'm Sarah Jarvis. I'm a GP and the author of Children's Health for Dummies. And I'm speaking today to Jenny Trent-Hughes, who's a family counsellor. We're going to be covering some of the advanced techniques for a dry night. You've done the basics. If you haven't, watch one of our other videos earlier on. But if not, we're going to be looking at where we can go next.
When I think of all these different types of techniques, I know that the one that I'm qualified to suggest when people come to me is rewards. And I find that that really works. When I first was introduced to the concept, I thought, reward charts, well, you know, what are you going to do? Reward them when they have a dry night? That's not fair, because then that puts the onus of responsibility on them.
I think that the best way to look at it is where your child is. It's not going to work if your child's not motivated, but it's also not going to work if your child hasn't had a dry night for, you know, their entire life, and you're telling them, when you get 7 dry nights, you get a really nice reward. Well, gee, thanks, mummy, but that's completely setting me up to fail. So if, for instance, they're just not at that stage, you can still reward them for maybe coming and letting you know as soon as they wet the bed, helping you to change the sheets, going to the loo by themselves before they go. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you do this all the time, probably more often than I do. But the real key here is to reward when you've had something positive. And it needs to be something that they can achieve. If you've got a child who's dry, you know, and has an accident maybe once or twice a week, then reward them for 7 days in a row of dry nights. But don't make a big deal of it if they don't. This isn't something that's in their face all the time, so that if they don't do it, they feel as if they failed. This has got to be about success.
Yes, because I always advise parents to be sure to include 1 or 2 activities that there's no way for them to fail with it. You know, like you said, going before you go to bed, letting me know, all these different things that will make them feel positive, because that's one of the biggest battles that you're fighting anyway. Absolutely. Is their mental attitude. One of the things that parents tell me quite often is that they want to know if there's a way to shorten the amount of time that the child is sleeping, in the hope that that will help alleviate the problem. Is that true?
Well, it can do, because naturally the bladder does fill up during the course of the night, and they may well get to the stage where the bladder is just so full that that natural tendency that they've learnt to hold it in just stops working. The obvious thing to do, first of all, of course, is to take your child to the loo just before they go to bed. Right. And that's something that they need to get into the habit of doing for themselves. But then we get into the very vexed question of whether or not you should lift your child at night.
Yes, I keep hearing that terminology, and I mean, I thought that that meant you actually sort of lifted the child up and carried them to the loo and then lifted them back. Is that really what it is?
Well, there's 2 ways of doing it, and that actually is one of them. One of the ways is you lift the child up, don't necessarily wake them up, and then you take them, put them on the loo, and they go while they're still half asleep. You put them back to bed. Now, of course, by that stage, the parents are wide awake, even though the child has gone fast asleep again.
And what would be the benefits in doing that?
Well, basically, you're trying to make that time shorter, exactly as you said at the beginning. The alternative is to wake your child up and get them to walk to the loo, to go to the loo. Then they're recognising that sensation of their bladder being full when they wake up. And hopefully, in the future, when they do have a full bladder, they'll wake themselves up. It probably doesn't work that well, but for some parents, it may be worth a try. But if it's not working in the short term, it's not worth persevering with in the long term. So we then move on to the next one.
Well, you've used the magic phrase, waking them up. What about these alarms? I keep hearing about the alarms, and a lot of people think that they're the most wonderful, revolutionary thing, and then other people think it's the worst thing ever.
It's bizarre, isn't it? They've been around for 50 years, and they work for lots of kids, but they probably don't work if your child isn't old enough to wake themselves up as soon as they wake. It does seem a bit barbaric for some parents. It is a loud noise, and you are jerking your child awake from sleep, but it does work for lots of children. But if it hasn't worked over maybe 3 months, it's probably not going to.
Then that brings us on to the one that I'm most frightened by, and I'm hoping you're going to allay my fears. Medication.
You are in very, very good company. Lots of parents really worry about side effects. And it's one of the reasons that actually a lot of the medicines we've used in the past, which probably did work in terms of reducing bedwetting, are very rarely used anymore. The one we tend to use is a medicine called desmopressin, which we used to give through a spray in the nose. Now we tend to give through tablets. Now, it does mean that if you've given your child their desmopressin tablet, you can't then give them lots to drink because that could be dangerous. But other than that, it's pretty free of side effects, actually. It really is quite safe. And your doctor is not going to recommend it unless they think it's perfectly safe.